Welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Andy Spiteri, and as always, joined by Dakota the Rapture Lasky. How are you, Dak?
I'm doing well. I hope my power or internet doesn't go out as this literal hurricane destroys my neighborhood, whatever's going on outside. It's crazy out there. Still feeling good. Been streaming a lot lately, a lot of Halo, and, trying to make the most of this crazy world we're living in. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. It's overbearingly hot in Calgary right now. And I think I was telling you last week, but nobody in Canada, or at least nobody in Calgary, has air conditioning because you only use it for 3 weeks of the year. But
Yeah.
holy, those 3 weeks are awful. They're awful. So it's stupidly hot here. But I guess I can't complain because I'd rather that than minus 35, which it usually isn't.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you can hear the wind now. You probably can, but it is crazy outside. And I feel like I told you this last week, but for the longest time, I thought Calgary was a hot city in Canada because of the Calgary Flames. It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I'm glad that. Well, not glad. I hope we can weather the heat here as I weather this storm. Hopefully my connection stays good, but we should be all right. I fixed the FiOS recently as well. We should be good. I'm looking forward to diving into this episode because it should be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And wouldn't that be just the icing on the cake for a hurricane to just wipe out New York City for this year?
Yeah, right. Jeez.
Oh man. And actually, shout out to the Calgary Flames. It's weird seeing hockey being played again, but I watched a game on Saturday and it was it wasn't as weird as I thought. It wasn't as weird as watching wrestling with no fans. I'll tell you that.
It's hard to watch without fans sometimes.
Yeah,
I
don't know if I'll ever get used to that. It's weird.
Yeah, I think that's why I kind of liked when they did the Boneyard match. I thought that was cool. If they don't overdo it, those kind of matches, I think it's all right. But when they do a straight up wrestling match in the ring, and all you can hear it's the meat slapping in the ring, and a couple two people jeering off behind the hockey boards or whatever. I'm oh man, this is desperate.
Yeah, weird times that we are living in. But you are right. We got a good show today. We are going to be talking all about what a Metroid game for the Nintendo 64 might have looked like, what we would have wanted it to look like, and what we think we would have actually gotten from Nintendo. But first, before we get there, Halo has always kind of been like an undercurrent on this show. You're obviously a big Halo fan, Dak. I'm a Halo fan, maybe not as big of a Halo fan, but I really enjoy the series for what I've played. We got some big Halo Infinite news this week. Do you want to tell everybody about that?
Well, we've got a lot of Halo Infinite news recently. Obviously, we had the tech demo come out, and then the big news that came out within the past week, the multiplayer is going to be free to play, which I am so excited for. I hope you all can join me because I'm sure it'll be cross-play. So make sure you got it on your PC or your Xbox or whatever it is. But that was the huge news. Halo, for the first time, the multiplayer is going to be free to play. I thought that was such an amazing move. It's probably the best news I've heard, other than the Ring being Installation 7, which has a lot of cool story and lore implications. And also, we should be getting some multiplayer showcase this month. I believe it'll be the online Gamescom or whatever they do for that. But yeah, the Infinite multiplayer being free is absolutely huge. It lowers the bar of accessibility with it, which I think is a really good game for pretty much any kind of game. The more people that you can get to play the game, the better. I'm really excited to have a huge player base. I'm excited to see what they do in terms of monetization, what I can be spending money on and what I don't need to spend money on, and what they can do with all those new players coming in, being able to check out the game entirely for free if they want. So I think that's really huge news. I think that's a great idea. I'm very excited for the implications both for the game and for the esports side of things, more players, more opportunities around tournaments online, and all that kind of stuff. And as a Halo fan, I'm going to be buying the full game anyway, but I'm excited for people who want to try it out, or maybe they're trying Halo for the first time. And I hope many of you who might not be playing Halo or love it as much as I do give it a shot. I'm excited for Halo Infinite. I want to see some more. And yeah, I thought that was really good news. And I don't know, I'm excited for the game. I can't wait to see some more and see more of my man Chief. So yeah, it's been really exciting times recently for us Halo fans.
It seems really smart to me too to go free to play because like man, I remember back in like the early 2000s or whatever, like Halo was the king. Like it
Hmm.
was the undisputed king of first person shooters, multiplayer games in general. Like Halo was the man on the
Hmm.
block. And like I feel like it kind of lost that over the years. Maybe, some of its market share crept away to Call of Duty or whatever, what have you. But like just making it free to play, I feel like just kind of like invites a lot of those people back into Halo,
Hmm.
and I'm really like I think that that's really cool. Halo is my kind of first person shooter. It's like a sci-fi, like it's not like military war necessarily or based on like real life like Call of Duty, which isn't my jam necessarily. So like I always thought that Halo was really cool, and I'm glad to see it like kind of taking some steps to reclaim the throne, I guess. So yeah, I think that that's good. I think it's cool. It's going to bring a lot of new players in, and I'm happy for that. But actually, the big news I was really talking about, Dak,
Oh,
is
okay.
the big news is that now Chief can get the grapple beam
Oh,
in Halo Infinite.
well,
He's gonna Metroid Prime 3 everybody in that game. I love it.
I thought it was funny how a new Halo game got the a hook shot in the game before Breath of the Wild or any of the new Zelda games did. Yeah, I like grapple hooks. I love movement and movement options in games. Like I love it in Melee. I love it on any kind of game where it gives me more, uh, options for creativity to traverse the map. And not just do it the same kind of way. I want to talk about
Right.
sprint because that's another thing. But I love grapple hooks. When I played Apex Legends, geez, I forgot the guy's name. The robot in that game, I play him. He has a grapple hook. I can't believe I forgot his name. But yeah, and I'm sure I'll remember it after this cast. I feel like an idiot. But yeah, I love those kind of movement options. I'm excited that they're trying to stick to what made the original games good, but still trying to tweak it a little bit, which I think is good. I don't want the same stuff recycled over and over again, but I don't want a Halo 4 or 5. I think they're gonna bounce out, and yeah, Halo is certainly lost some of that market share over time because the quality of games maybe went down a little bit and way more games came out. But so many games have blown up because they were free to play and stuff like that, and then they added new
Yeah.
things to those games. I mean, obvious example is Fortnite, which you can have your opinions on Fortnite as a game, but you can't deny the success it has as a game, as an esport, and overall as a product. Coming from the fact that they made the multiplayer free to play, because as you may not remember, the original game was out for a while, no one, no one was playing it, and then they came out with the battle royale mode that was free to play, and everyone got in. That's another thing too. I've heard rumors that there will be a battle royale mode for Halo Infinite, which I am so excited for. I love battle royale games. PUBG is a big favorite of mine. I love Warzone, and I think Halo is perfect for it. You got the sandbox, the vehicles. You can drop in like an ODST from orbit. The parts of the ring falling out as the zone gets smaller. I mean, it's absolutely perfect for it.
I think it just makes too much sense to
Exactly.
do. And I
Yeah.
know that some people will kind of complain about jumping on the bandwagon, but like I don't know. I feel
Nothing
like at
wrong
the
with
end of the
that.
day, like if it's fun and it makes sense, like I kind of agree actually. And I'm not even a big fan of like those kind of games, but like it makes a lot of sense to me to see a game like Halo kind of embrace the battle royale aspect. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm looking forward to Halo Infinite. It definitely looks like it's got some of those more Metroid Prime vibes to it, which I obviously am all about.
Yeah, man, dude, I can't wait to see on the ring in the battlefield, man. I'm waiting for Andy's controller skills.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
looking
pretty
forward
skilled,
to it.
Dak. Don't worry.
Hey, man, I'm no pro, but I'm ready to click some heads. But yeah, it should be exciting. I'm sure we'll talk about it again in the future. And yeah, I think I hope we get to play with some of y'all. But I'm excited. I can't wait to see the multiplayer showcase. I know it's not Metroid, but I'm excited for it. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Also, everyone listening, you could like obliterate me in Halo. I guarantee. Even the least skilled player will be able to obliterate me. Okay, let's move on and let's dive into some rumor and innuendo here, Dak, before we get
okay.
into the Metroid 64 business. Um, so there have been some tweets going around that there is a rumored Nintendo Direct, and it's going to happen sometime in August. I think we got days of like either the 11th to the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very prolific leaker, friend of the show actually. She gave us a shout out a couple weeks ago, named Tiffany Treadmore. She detailed what we can expect to see in this direct, and we're going to go through this list. I just want to make it abundantly clear. Take this with a grain of salt. This is rumor and innuendo. None of it's confirmed. Plans could change. But we thought it would be fun to kind of take a peek down here and see, and speculate on some of the things that she mentioned that could be coming up the pipe. Because, like, there is a lot of stuff that looks really, really cool in this rumored direct. So, that disclaimer being said, this is a rumor. Don't quote us on anything, but let's dive in here.
All right.
So, first of all, we've got a new Earthbound game coming, which I actually think is kind of cool. You're not really an Earthbound fan, right, Deck?
I mean, I've been told by friends that like, oh, you should play this game. You'd really like it. I just never really got into it. But I like I've played it. I've played like Earthbound,
Right.
But a new game or a reboot of it, because yeah, it says like new game or reboot. I think that'd be cool. I think it'd be cool for Mother Earthbound fans. I'd certainly, if it's on the Switch or whatever, yeah, I'll pick it up and play that.
Yeah. Another cool thing, not Metroid related, is there's a new Donkey Kong related property. Could we see what was your game called?
Oh, Donkey Kong Jungle Breath.
Jungle Breath.
Yes. Oh my god, an open
I
world
would buy
Donkey
that.
Kong game or like a sequel to DK64. That is what I want so badly. Yeah, you can go back and what episode was that? Is that two episodes? I think that was two episodes
That
ago.
was 2 episodes ago where you were dying and we brought in Elias.
Yes, so 2 episodes ago I went into Donkey Kong Jungle Breath, which, my DK Breath of the Wild style game where you got a huge sprawling jungle to explore and all these different things to find there. I mean, I think that is just absolutely perfect. Sells itself. I really hope that's what they do with it. I like Donkey Kong Country and all of that. I wouldn't say I'd be disappointed, but I hope it's not a third Donkey Kong Country game, and it seems like it's going to be a new DK property. Like, it's not going to be something that we've just got. A new Donkey Kong Country game would be cool, but I would love something more along the lines of a more open world or like
Right.
3D adventuring like DK64 kind of game, because that is my favorite DK game.
I agree with you. I love DK64. That game
Mm-hmm.
was so fun and
Hell
just
yeah.
gives me the nostalgic goosebumps. But I also wouldn't be upset if we got Donkey Kong Country 3. I think we were
Yeah.
talking about it a couple weeks ago where like
Well, that
I
game's out
f-
already.
oh
Donkey Kong
wow,
Country
okay.
3.
So
But yeah, I
Donkey
agree.
Kong Donkey Kong Country Returns 3, whatever
Yeah,
they want to call
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I feel like Retro probably was working on this. Like, it makes sense to me that they were kind of rounding out the trilogy because it feels like everything in
hmm
video games is trilogies. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if that is what it was. And maybe that's another reason why, like, development on Prime 4 has seemed even slower than usual. Is just because, like, when Retro got Prime 4 back, excuse me, they had to finish up Donkey Kong. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But I actually just love most Donkey Kong games. Even like Diddy Kong Racing is one of my favorite
Oh,
games.
hell
So
yeah. Love that game. Love that game.
it's better than every Mario Kart game. I'm gonna just throw
Oh,
that out
that
there right
those are
now.
those are some words right there. But I would stand next to you on that one. I love Diddy
Come
Kong
at me,
Racing.
Spiteri 316.
Yeah, yeah.
I love Diddy Kong Racing, but yeah, so that one caught my eye in this. Another thing that caught my eye. We're not gonna list every single thing here, but there is a non Breath of the Wild 2 Zelda game that is coming out supposedly, and it'll be one that quote will make you go, oh duh. So I don't know what that means. We were kind of speculating before the show started. Maybe it means like Hyrule Warriors, a sequel to that, or maybe it means like another Cadence of Hyrule, or maybe it just means Skyward Sword for the Switch, which would make sense because 10 years after the original game launched, that we'd have Skyward Sword HD. I feel like those ones would be obvious, but the Zelda fan of me is just like I wonder what this could be.
I maybe it's gonna be like an Ocarina of Time HD Switch release, because that would be like, oh, duh, you gotta do Ocarina of Time again. That's the one. Yeah,
You know what? And I'd be totally fine with that,
yeah,
actually.
exactly. Yeah, I personally don't know what exactly would be like an oh duh for me because I don't have those expectations for a Zelda game, so I'm not like like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I feel like any Zelda game that comes out, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to see what that is because obviously everyone's waiting for the Breath of the Wild sequel. So to get another non Breath of the Wild Zelda game, I'm interested to see what that would be. So
So to take my Metroid hat off for a second here and put on my Zelda hat. So in 2013, we got the Wind Waker HD, which came out 10 years after the Wind Waker, and then in 2016 we got Twilight Princess HD, which came out 10 years after Twilight Princess. So to me, I'm just like, okay, well it would make sense to have Skyward Sword HD come out 10 years after Skyward Sword originally did in 2011. But in my mind, I'm just like, okay, well, like, let's assume that Breath of the Wild 2 launches in 2021. I feel like Skyward Sword HD would have to come out like very early in the year, like February maybe or March at the latest, and then Breath of the Wild would be like maybe a November December game. I don't know.
that makes sense to me.
It makes sense to me. So yeah, that could be one that makes you go, duh, I guess. But let's move on to some of the more Metroidy parts of this supposed leak. There is a working title called Metroidvania, and as the name implies, it's a Metroidvania game. There isn't. It's just a secret working title, so there's no franchise attached to it. It doesn't say what it is. I love myself a good Metroidvania game though, so I would be really excited to, play whatever this happens to end up being. And it
Hey,
makes me think. I wonder, like, is it an existing Nintendo franchise? Because I mean, other than Metroid, they don't really do Metroidvania games.
maybe it's a new Castlevania game. I could see
Oh
that,
man,
But
God, that'd be good.
but maybe they should just keep the secret working title as Metroidvania game for Nintendo. Like, why even call it anything else? Just keep that as the title. It'll sell easy.
I kind of
Yeah.
love that actually.
All right, just let it
It
rock.
reminds me of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, where it's like, let's not name this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, whatever. That's just what it is. Just screw it.
Okay, so unsurprising to anybody, but this leak also says that Metroid Prime Trilogy
Uh huh.
is going to be shown and it's ready to go. This one, I'm just like, you know, I feel like every leak I've read for the last 2 years
Everyone.
has said, okay, Metroid Prime Trilogy is ready to go. And you know what? I feel like it probably is ready to go. But I'll believe it's coming out when I see the trailer for it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been like an easy like pick for rumors, like to make it seem valid because everyone knows that it's an obvious game that should be out already. No one's gonna complain about that coming out. So it's like you could always just throw that in on a rumor and you're like, oh yeah, Metroid Prime Trilogy, that's great, love to see that. Again, my stance on this. I can already play Metroid Prime Trilogy on my PC, so personally, I don't at this point care if it comes out at all. But I will say that I do care it comes out because I want people who don't have that opportunity to play it like
Right.
I do to experience the games on Switch. And obviously, another Metroid game coming out for people to buy is always a good thing. So in that capacity, yes, I would love to see Metroid Prime Trilogy actually exist. I've heard this so many times before. Like you said, I'll believe it when I see it. But at the very least, it's not one of those things where at least personally, I urgently need it. But I do want people to experience the game. There are tons of people who haven't gotten to play Metroid Prime or Prime 2 or even Prime 3, and having that package together is just perfect, especially if they could update, the controls a little bit. That'd be great too. And if they do and they have regular dual analog, hell, I might buy it just so I can play it on the go. And, to support the game. So, hell, I'll even, buy a copy, give it away on my stream. So, I do
There you
hope
go.
that's true, but again, it's one of those things where this is what the 35th, 36th time I feel like I've read this,
Yeah,
and
it's ridiculous.
it doesn't mean anything at this point. I think.
And so two things there. Like I feel like I can't remember if we talked about this on the show or off air, but I feel like this would definitely have dual analog controls. We talked about it off air.
Yes, yeah, I think we talked about that off. Yeah, I would,
Yeah,
I would have to think that it would.
I think so.
I think Nintendo is almost always good at having a lot of control schemes for different games, especially older games that are ported or
Yeah,
whatever. So I would like to think that they would have the original, tank controls for the first two games, the original motion controls for Prime 3, and then updated, dual analog or gyro or whatever it is that people would also like to play with, because that's usually how they go about things. And I think that would be smart, and I don't think it would really require too much anyway. So that would be again another great reason to have Prime 3 or Prime Trilogy come out on the Switch. So again, I hope it's true, but We'll
Yeah,
see.
it seems like it seems like we've been hearing this a lot. I actually think that if they released, let's say that they released Prime Trilogy on the Switch in 1 month, I think that this would be the best-selling Metroid game ever by
Probably
like a
would.
decent amount.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
man, it's just like if you have it, make it happen already. Like, what are you waiting for? But the real meat of this alleged leak
Mm-hmm.
that Tiffany posted is a new Metroid game, and that's all she said was new Metroid. But this also ties into the rumors that we heard when we covered Paper Mario way back when about a new 2D Metroid game coming out. So like part of me is just assuming that it's that new 2D Metroid that we've heard about and like I said, like I don't really take these rumors with too much grains of salt here, but to me, like maybe there's a lot of smoke here. Maybe there's a fire somewhere in here as well, because like this isn't the first leaker that's mentioned a new Metroid game. I think that as we touched on in the Paper Mario episode, I think we have like reason enough to be cautiously optimistic. The only thing that I think would be weird is if there was a new 2D Metroid releasing in like the same window as Metroid Prime Trilogy. But then again, I feel like the trilogy part is the more iffy part to me. What do you think?
Hmm. I've mostly up until recently I've mostly subscribed to feeling that they wouldn't release another Metroid game until Prime 4 comes out. And like Prime 4 would be like, all right, if the if this does well, we're making more Metroid games. If not, see you in 10 years. Until Federation Force 2 or something. And now I don't really. Now I'm not very sure. Now it seems like yeah, they might go like throwing out the 2D Metroid as well. I don't think it's out of the realm possibility of them releasing it within the same window of Prime 4 or Prime Trilogy. I mean, back remember when Prime came out, Prime and Fusion came out. I pretty much on
The
top of
same
each
day.
other. Yeah, they came out the same day, and I got them the same time. And I don't think that really was a bad thing because the games are so distinctly different, and they were on different systems. They kind of catered to different audiences in a way, but at the same time, the same audience who could buy both games. And both of those games were awesome, and are arguably part of that beginning of that kind of that 2000s golden age for or platinum age or whatever you want to call it for Nintendo or for
Right.
Metroid when you had a bunch more Metroid games coming out. You had spin-offs coming out. They were all for the most part really good. So I'm not against that. I don't think it's out of the realm possibility. In fact, the only thing that might make me think otherwise is because they would all be releasing on Switch. Like it wouldn't be one of them releasing on a portable, the other one releasing on the console. Now it's the same thing, so it's different from like the Fusion game releasing on Game Boy Advance and Prime on GameCube. Now it would be the trilogy on Switch, the 2D Metroid on Switch, Prime 4 on Switch, which I'm sure they want. Everyone wants to get a Switch, but it is slightly different in context. That being said, I do think they would do that. And hey, if they want to stack us with Metroid games, I'm not going to argue. And I think that might even, give some more weight to the releases. It, might show that Nintendo has some more confidence in it, that they can have them almost like quote unquote compete with each other. But it depends on really how they look at those games. Would they consider, Prime Trilogy as significant of a release as a completely new game? They might. And so maybe they wouldn't stack them like that, or maybe they just kind of look at it as we're just porting these games. It's not the same as releasing an entirely new game. We can release them within the same time frame. And honestly, I've never known how Nintendo really feels about Metroid, other than kind of not
Hot and
much.
cold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little. I don't know, because I told you this about before the show, and I wasn't sure if I was going to mention it, but I'm going to. I definitely read somewhere on the internet at some point that the new Metroid game might be another spin-off. So I don't want that, but unless it's a new Hunters game, then I'm down. So I'm in a whole state of confusion with this because I did not expect them to be releasing a new Metroid game before Prime 4. I thought that was the one that they were riding on. That was the putting all their eggs in that basket. Now it doesn't seem like that's the case. Now we're in a
Hmm.
situation where we might be getting a new 2D Metroid, a new 3D Metroid, and a re-release of three 3D Metroids in one package, all around potentially the same time. Whether or not I mean, I think that could be overall a good thing. Again, I think they do cater to different kinds of audiences, but at the same time, if they're all on the same console, people might pick all of them up at the same time. Maybe they release the trilogy for $20, right? And then the other games still seem that much more appeasing. You could buy all of them and not, break the bank. So, hey, more Metroid is always good. At this point, I hope a new 2D Metroid's really good. I have so many expectations for the Fusion sequel at this point that like this game better be good. I hope it's not another prequel or interquel. Please continue the story. But I'm excited that these leaks mention Metroid games because that's what we want.
There you go. And if you want to hear our pitches, by the way, for
Hmm.
a Metroid Fusion sequel, check out our episode last week. We had a lot of love on that show, by the way. So thank you to everyone that commented.
Yeah.
Okay, so it feels like we've been talking forever. At
Oh wait, before we move on, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one more thing that's from these leaks: a new Super Mario Strikers game for the Switch.
oh yes, how could I
Yes.
forget?
How could you forget, man? I am a huge Super Mario Strikers fan. I remember going to the Nintendo World Store, now Nintendo New York, in New York City, to play in a Super Mario Strikers tournament when I was a kid. My dad brought me there with my friends. I remember grinding online and charged, doing all the stupid tricks with the Boo Ghost off the bank on the right side. You got the Toad Flip. I love Super Mario Strikers. It baffles me that it's been 13 years since the last Super Mario Strikers game. Just like it's been 13 years since the last Metroid Prime game. Absolutely insane to me. I love Super Mario Strikers. This is one thing that I really, really, really hope is true because Strikers is so much fun. A third game would be so sick. I really hope that's true. So sorry, I had to get that in there because I love that game.
It seems weird to me that they kind of stuck with Mario Tennis as like the sports game
All
that
right?
they still make. When I feel like a lot of people really loved Mario Golf. Actually, that's the one that I remember hearing like was really awesome. I
Yeah.
don't know. Those Mario Sport, the none of the Mario sports games were really kind of up my alley, but it definitely does say something about Mario Strikers in there. So shout
It
out to all
it
you
it
soccer fans out
does.
there.
Hell yeah.
So these are rumors, and none of it's confirmed. So again, don't get your hopes up too high because that's how you get disappointed. But by God, if they turn out to be even like half true, I would be a happy man.
Mhm. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on and let's finally get to what we're here to talk about today. Metroid on the Nintendo 64. Of course, we all know that we went 8 long years between Super Metroid and Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion, completely skipping the N64 generation. So, our goal today, our question that we asked ourselves is, what do we think a Metroid game on the N64 would have looked like? And more importantly, maybe, would it have been good? Dak, I kind of put you on the spot last week and made you go first with the pitch. So I'll go first this week if you want, and
Okay.
kind of tell you what I would have wanted,
Mhm.
and then what I think Nintendo would have actually probably done. So first off, what I would have absolutely wanted the most is, and the big reason that Metroid skipped the N64 was because they said that they couldn't figure out how to translate it into 3D. I would have just wanted them to do 2D. And
Hmm.
it's not like that was like completely, sacrilege at that time because you had Yoshi's Story, which is 2D. You had
Love that game.
Kirby Crystal, whatever it was called, that was 2D. I feel like if you couldn't figure out how to do it, just make a 2D game. It could have been like 2.5D, kind of like 3D esque, like Yoshi's Island, where it was like a 3D characters or whatever, but they were in a 2D working space.
Yep.
So I think a 2.5D could have been cool. Or, I mean, like look over to the PlayStation side of things, and on the Sony side, you have Castlevania Symphony of the Night absolutely tearing it up, and people didn't care that that was a 2D game that used sprites. They were just like, this game is awesome. This game owns. It was this huge, huge Metroidvania map that basically was like two maps in one since you flipped the castle upside down. Man, that game. I mean, I love Symphony of the Night. I think it's one of probably the one of the greatest games ever. Like it would have been so easy, I think, to do something like that with Metroid. And you know what? They could have used pixel work if they really wanted. I would have actually preferred that they use pixel work because then it kind of would have avoided the aging of the graphics like a lot of the early N64 games had.
Hmm.
So that would have been my dream scenario is like to see the new 2D Metroid made for the N64 or even a 2.5D Metroid. And just if you couldn't figure it out, just do what you know and have the 2D presentation. You know what? I was actually even thinking, and it's funny that you mentioned this earlier, but I was almost even thinking like in a perfect world, I wonder if I wouldn't have just wanted Metroid Fusion to be an N64 game
Hmm.
because like and you mentioned how they both came out on the same day, which is awesome. But I also feel like there might have been some people that were just like, okay, well, like there's two new Metroid games out, but I can only afford one, or like I can only ask my parents for one for
Hmm.
Christmas, or something like that, right? So like maybe some time in between them to breathe a little bit. And I feel like maybe a Fusion was like kind of a 2.5D Metroid game on the N64. That could have been pretty cool, like, and given it a little bit more breathing room because as much as like I think like the Metroid community really loves Fusion and it's a beloved game,
Hell
but
yeah.
I think in like the overall like grand scheme of things, I feel like it definitely got overshadowed by Metroid Prime, and I mean rightfully so. Metroid Prime is one of the best games ever, so maybe giving Fusion a little bit of a its own kind of space and room to breathe would have been a good idea. So I feel like that is what I would have wanted to see happen in an ideal world. But obviously, not only did we not get that, but I definitely don't think that that would have happened.
Hmm.
Um, Dak, what would have been like your dream N64 presentation for Metroid?
Well, before I get into that, I want to comment on what you said first.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay.
I definitely think that you brought up Yoshi's Story, and that's what I was thinking. What they would do would be like a 2.5D platformer like that. I think you're kind of spot on with that. Because at the end of the day, with the N64, they wanted to challenge what we thought video games could look like, right? They're bringing franchises classically in 2D to 3D, etc. So I don't know if they would have done like pixel art, right? But something like Yoshi's Story, where it has that like stylized look,
Right.
and is a 2D platformer for all intents and purposes, but has a like 2.5, you can go in and out in the foreground and background. I think is what they probably would have done on the N64, or like maybe should have done. And that would make sense because it would challenge, a little bit of what we know about Metroid without going too far, because obviously they didn't seem to know what they were doing at all in terms of trying to make it 3D.
Right.
Putting Fusion on N64, I've never thought of, because you bring up like, oh, maybe you couldn't get both games at the same time. I will say that I don't know if you know that or remember this, but the Prima, the 2-in-1 guide they came out with, that's what I got, and I'm pretty sure that influenced my parents on getting both games, because there was a guide that had both Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion in the guide. So it kind of like like there a lot of the marketing stuff that kind of tied the games together in a little way, even though they were story wise and gameplay wise completely unrelated. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's why I got both of them at the same time. But of course, I got them for Christmas too, and I didn't buy them because I was like 8 years old. But I was just thinking about that. So yeah, so what I would have liked for an N64 Metro game, and I mentioned this to you earlier, and I think it almost makes too much sense to me, and I'm surprised that they never really ended up doing it. And the reason I think we wanted to talk about this topic for a while, but I also the whole Giga leak for Nintendo that came out recently, and the fact that, well, there was no Metroid N64 game ever, so we don't get to get on the fun on that. Certainly motivated this a little bit, I think. But I always thought that they
Yep.
literally could have just copied Ocarina of Time and just slapped Metroid stuff on it. I not sure why they didn't do that, because they were willing to do that with other. I mean, how many Mario 64 clones did we see immediately right out after that, especially on the N64? So I was kind of surprised that they never just cloned Ocarina of Time and just put Metroid stuff on it. So much of what Ocarina of Time
Hmm.
did works for Metroid, and they ended up using in some games. The first thing I think of is the lock on with the Z lock, right? You Z locking in Ocarina of Time. You literally could do that for a Metroid game, and that would make up for making it hard to aim at the N64 controller in third person.
Right.
And I think they would have done it in third person in that kind of way. Maybe they didn't do it because they know how to do like the Zelda fantasy style, but like maybe trying to make like a more, not realistic, but kind of more realistic in sci-fi area, maybe like, or look, maybe was a little harder. They didn't know how to do it on the N64, but gameplay wise, the item, collecting items and how the items are used, and a morph ball would have been easy. You use the Z lock for a lock on system. It makes too much sense to me, and I'm surprised they didn't do it, because they could have easily just copied and pasted the gameplay loop and all the different functions of Ocarina of Time and just slap Samus in there and put all the Metroid stuff, and it probably would have been really good. And we know from some of the beta and alpha images from Metroid Prime that they did toy with the fact, or toy with the idea of making it a third person shooter.
Right.
It was a little more like over the shoulder third person, not like kind of, Zelda third person, which is a little farther back and not over the shoulder. But I think both could have worked, maybe doing the third person over the shoulder like Gears of War might have made it, might have fit like the shooting aspect of the game more. But I think it would have been fine, having the game play like a Zelda game does, where you have that similar control of the camera and be able to lock onto stuff. I think that would have been great and would have been a great way to bring Metroid into 3D. At the same time, would we have gotten Metroid Prime if they had done that? I don't know. I don't know if we would have. Maybe they would have. Maybe it wouldn't have worked, and they wouldn't have done it. Maybe they would have worked too well. We never would have gotten the first-person versions, and Metroid Prime, all of them would be third-person. So the annals of history might have been completely different had the game come out, if it ever existed, could have existed at all. But that always, I think, is what they should have done, is just go right for Ocarina of Time. That formula works. Just copy and paste it. But what we probably would have gotten is maybe not something that is good. Maybe they would have butchered it and somehow watered it down a little bit. I think they probably would have just gone for the platformer route. But at the same time, again, a lot of the N64 stuff was bringing those older games, those franchises we know, into the 3D space. And it seems like they just couldn't figure out how to really do that. But I think if they did do Metroid, they would have wanted to do the same thing. They wouldn't have wanted to just do a platformer like it's been done before, even if it was a 2.5D platformer. I don't know if that would have been different enough. I think they're striving to really nail like what is expected of the N64. Probably led them to not doing it at all. But I really think they could have just taken Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask or whatever, copy and paste it, throw Samus in there. It would have been a great game.
So I have a couple things to respond to with. First of all, it's funny that you mentioned kind of copy and pasting Ocarina of Time. For the Zelda podcast, I'm actually playing Star Fox Adventures right now, which is like literally they copy and pasted everything from Ocarina of Time and just put Fox McCloud and like Dinosaur Planet into there. So the thought of Samus doing like her little, when she finds an item, doing like the Zelda like do 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 thing is like hilarious to me.
Maybe not copy that, but yeah, that wouldn't have been bad.
You would not believe how often Fox does that in Star Fox Adventures.
I don't remember, but yeah, I actually, now you mentioned that, yeah, he does. I completely forgot about that.
So one thing I wonder, so when you're saying like Metroid should have taken the Zelda formula, I'm actually not too opposed to that at all. I think that could have been cool, but there is one very specific drawback to that.
Okay.
Which I wonder if it didn't kind of kibosh the idea, where in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, you can't jump. And like you can jump, but it's only after you've run off a ledge or something like that. Whereas, in Metroid, obviously, like you're going up, you're going down, you're going side. Like it's very much kind of a platformer in the vein of Mario in the sense. So like I wonder if the ability, or the lack of the ability rather, to jump really kind of hindered, Nintendo being like, okay, well let's just take that and move it over. I would have thought that if anything, maybe even like Mario could have been a decent example of them to copy.
Mm-hmm.
But the other the other thing that I wanted to comment on quickly before I moved on to like what I thought Nintendo would do is I always actually kind of thought that your Dream N64 game would have been a first person game even back then.
Well, I think it's hard to say now. Maybe back then when I was a kid, yeah, like it would have. But knowing how like most N64 first-person shooters like aged, I mean, GoldenEye is a great game for its time, right? But I would never go back and play GoldenEye now because it's really horribly controlled. And even back then, I think you kind of played the game within the realm of its limitations, kind of knowing that, kind of accepting it for what it was. Yeah, I mean, I think would have been cool to have a first-person shooter, sure, but when I think of like an N64 game, the third-person adventure was so common, in its multiple ways that it felt right, or it feels like it would have fit right in. But I never thought about the jump thing. That's actually a good point, because Metroid does kind of fit that like middle area. It's not as acrobatic as a Mario game, but it's way more acrobatic than a Zelda game. And so finding that balance of, can she jump? Well, okay, it's third person. It's going to be easy for the player to be able to do those platforming aspects of the game without help. If it's over the shoulder like a third person, like Gears of War game, it'll certainly be harder. Do they implement just an auto jump? Well, then it doesn't really feel like a Metroid game. Did they implement, a manual jump? Well, maybe it's too hard, but then maybe you could have the grapple, beam to help you out and stuff. I think they could have done it, but when you put it that way, I never thought about that. I can see how they were probably hesitant to, do that and attempt it, or maybe they, tried
Right.
or knew they could try or like thought about it and be like, oh, this is a little more difficult than, what meets the eye at first glance, or easier said than done. So that's a
Well,
good point.
it's just such a vertical game, whereas Zelda is
Exactly.
mostly like you're going, from point A to point B in a straight line.
Hmm.
So yeah, that would have been a challenge, I think, for them. I'll tell you what I think a Metroid game probably would have looked like. I agree with you, in the sense of like, you know my dream would have been a 2.5D game. I think that would have been awesome. I
Yep.
would have even taken a Zelda like game and even just kind of maybe eliminate vertical jumping. I think that even that could have been pretty cool. But
Hmm.
what I think we would have got is your standard like 3D platformer, kind of in the vein of Super Mario 64 almost, but obviously a little bit more Metroidy. I think that I think that it would have been kind of like Castlevania 64, which isn't really a
Mm.
good thing. That series really struggled to go from 2D to 3D, and I feel like Metroid probably would have had the same kind of challenges as that one. I feel like I don't know. Maybe it's just like in hindsight and trying to. It's hard to put myself back into like 1998 or whatever, but like I just feel like it would have been like your average 3D platformer. The world would have looked basically like I can imagine the whole game looking like the inside of Jabby Jabby's belly from Ocarina of Time, where it's like
Mm.
kind of this gross looking world or something.
Yeah.
I think that the character model for Samus would have looked
Bad.
probably pretty laughable, yeah,
Yeah.
by today's standards. And then I think that the thing that even even like Metroid Prime obviously really struggles with, is how to integrate some of the power ups and make them work in like a 3D space, specifically the space jump and the speed booster, which I
Yep.
feel like
Very
are
true.
staples of 2D Metroid, but like how do you do them properly in 3D? And I feel like Nintendo would have had a 3D platformer and tried to implement these things, and I don't know that it would have been fantastic. I could totally see them doing the, like you said, like everything had to be brought into 3D,
Yeah.
even when maybe it shouldn't have or it didn't need to
Yeah.
be.
Exactly.
They would have tried to bring it in 3D. They would have tried to bring over all the classic items, and you know what? Maybe it would have worked, because if you'd have told me that the hook shot would be really awesome in 3D, I would have been like, I don't know about that, but I just I'm having a hard time envisioning with the especially with the N64's limitations how this would have kind of panned out in a really great way.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why they probably didn't do first person, because it would it would highlight the probably gross environment they built, and at the same time you wouldn't be able to take in like the character model and some other stuff too, while also at the same time a first person shooter probably would have made, uh like the platforming stuff like jumping more feasible, because you can a lot easier like judge where you're going to jump in first person. um and yeah, now that I think about it a little more, I guess a first person shooter wouldn't have been that bad. It's still not ideal on the N64 controller, but it was doable. um
I loved Perfect Dark, actually. Like
yeah,
I
no, those are
love that
good
game. I'll
games.
still play that game.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely not bad games at all. But I think at the same time too, is a different Nintendo. I mean, like to take their like a first person shooter wasn't, that wasn't a mainstream thing back then, right? It certainly wasn't like a tried and true formula. Like it was still pretty new in the '90s, even on PC on PC. So I think that huge of a jump. I mean, that's probably why it took them a whole generation to even make Prime, because like that big of a jump to not even just in the third D 3D, but that genre itself was a huge leap and a big, experiment and a big risk too. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I definitely think that, yeah, if they were gonna take a game, they wouldn't have just kind of done the platforming thing, even though that probably would have been cool, probably the best thing to do. They wanted to bring it into that new kind of generation, that new world. And Metroid might have been the hardest because, with Mario, with Zelda, it's, the Mario environments they're not generic, but they're a little more basic, and they're colorful and they pop, and it's bright, right? And Zelda, maybe doesn't pop as much, but things are a little more. They stand out a little more. Metroid,
It's very whimsical. Yeah.
exactly, whimsical. Yeah, that's a good word for it. But like with Metroid, they were gonna be making, gray hallways, brown ground outside. Like would we
Yeah.
even want to really look at that in the N64? And you bring up Castlevania 64, and when I think of that game, I think of gray walls and gray
Ugly
floors
halls.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Exactly, which I don't know if. Which probably would have been fine from a gameplay perspective, but knowing Nintendo, I don't know if they would have been happy with showing off a game like that. When Retro came at them with
Right.
Metroid Prime, you have a lot more. The what was capable on the GameCube is a little more. The environments a little more fleshed out and different. And obviously, you think of like the comparison of like from Chozo Ruins to the Talon Overworld to Magmore Caverns. They're all very distinct, and you can do a lot more with that. The N64 couldn't really. I don't know if it would have been able to support all those different kinds of environments and making them look all very as distinct too. But maybe they could have. Maybe they could have made it a little more whimsical, a little stand out a little more. And that would have made probably a very different Metroid game. But yeah, I still think
I,
that they would have done that kind of stuff.
I do too. I mean, I think that it's one of the hallmarks of Metroid. I feel like is just the atmosphere, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that they could have gotten the same kind of atmosphere on the N64 in a 3D workspace. Maybe
Yeah.
they could. I don't know. Like, do you think? I don't know. Like for me, I just have a hard time seeing a 3D platformer for the N64 that's a Metroid game being good. Like, what do you think they could have done to make this really good? In my mind, it's like, okay, well, like you have to, you have to nail the music, obviously, which I feel like they could have probably done.
Yeah, they could have done that.
Um, you have to really nail the overworld, and I'm trying to think of like some other some other N64 games that had like a really atmospheric but like alien sort of vibe. I'm actually thinking of even Perfect Dark. There was a couple levels in there when you're in like Area 51 that was kind of cool, but like I don't know. I don't know if they could have translated that. Like
Yeah.
what do you think could have made this like 3D platformer like a decent Metroid game?
Uh, I don't know. I think I'm right there with you. I think it's definitely a challenge. I do think if they maybe went a little more of a stylized route, I think would have been a good idea. It might have been a little different from what we'd expect from a Metroid game, but maybe if they made it a little more whimsical and stuff like that could have been well. Like when I'm thinking of an N64 Metroid game, I think like, a lot of it does come back to the gameplay. And again, I go back to Ocarina of Time with the lock on. I think that system really would have worked really well. Um, and maybe it wouldn't have been so much about getting like the graphics right, but really getting that gameplay loop correct. And I do think they could have, other than like the jumping challenge, I do think that they could have done it in a third person kind of way. But it's not just the gameplay. You're right. It does come back to the whole package. Could they have made it like feel atmospheric and ambient in those kind of ways? I do in a way, but how successful it would have been, I don't know. I think maybe if they went more of a stylized, maybe even not cartoony, but maybe they could have kind of way, it would have fallen in line a little more with the other games they were making at the time. And so they could have even taken more of that. Oh geez, my lights just flashed. Ooh, oh. The
Hurricane's
Nintendo
coming for
gods
you.
hear me. Um, but I don't know. I think it was. I think it would have been possible. I think really what it was is that they wanted to get it right. They really wanted to get it right. And maybe they just weren't confident that they could have made something as good as Ocarina of Time or something as good as Super Mario 64. The expectations of the time, a lot of those franchises that they brought into 3D turned out pretty good, and maybe
That's an understatement.
you
Like it's
know
some of the best games of all time.
e-
Still, I think in 2020.
exactly. Maybe they just weren't confident that a Metroid game would have been the same way, which I don't know, because how many people really thought that like a 3D Zelda game like Ocarina of Time would have been as good as the other Zelda games, or Super Mario 64, a 3D Mario being as good as Super Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario World or anything like that? I'm sure you asked a ton of people. Even going into Metroid Prime, a ton of people were like, "Oh, how could you make this a 3D first-person shooter?" Blah blah blah. I'm sure Nintendo was along the same lines and feeling that way,
Right.
and taking a risk with Mario or Zelda is certainly a big difference of taking a risk with a series like Metroid, which is certainly smaller and has a smaller player base and less games. There are only like how many games before Metroid Prime came out? Like three. So whereas it was a lot different for Mario, so many more games. Zelda had a bunch more. Well, didn't have too many more, but it had some. So yeah, I think again, I think it might have just. I think a lot of it comes down to the type of company and developers Nintendo was at the time. Um, them not being confident, being able to really pull it together. I mean, even now we're still questioning like, would this really have worked? I'm sure they felt the same way, and uh, moving it into like a first person shooter certainly is something that probably isn't taken the same way as it is now, where first person shooters are the
Right.
zeitgeist, right? But that's why it always brings me back to like if they did something like an Ocarina of Time game or even like a Super Mario 64 game and kind of copy and paste it, if they could just come over those technical hurdles of like the jump and implementing some of those Metroid items. I think that's a good point too, is maybe they didn't think a lot of the stuff that worked in the 2D Metroids would have worked. They're probably thinking like, well, what can we even have her do? Like, I don't know how we're gonna make the screw attack work or the speed booster work or this work or that work. At that point, what's the
I was
Metroid
thinking
game?
about this. I was thinking about it, and I was just like, okay, like what specifically wouldn't work in 3D? And I think that the only two things that really stick out to me are the space jump, because like you can just basically fly and jump anywhere. Um, and I bet you they regret making that a thing in Super Metroid. And I think that the speed booster, but I even then I feel like the speed booster could have worked maybe if you did it almost like Other M did, where like you have
Mm-hmm.
designated like run pads or something like that. But I think the space jump is really the one that's really tricky. Because even the screw attack, I feel like you could have like readjusted that, where like maybe it's just like almost like a force field around you or something that damages everything around you, and like it doesn't activate when you jump necessarily. I
Yeah,
think that they could have done that. I think a grapple would have been easy to do.
grapple's easy.
um Obviously, I mean, at this time I think there was basically only that, and then all the different types of missiles and beams and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yep. And like the
I
morph
think
ball would have been fine.
yeah, I think the morph ball would have been fine. I think it was the space jump that was really the killer, and I
Yeah.
don't know how they would have done that at all. Maybe like have designated like jump spots or something like that. I'm not sure, or maybe they just would have scrapped it. I would have been actually fine just scrapping it,
No,
but
yeah, that's the thing too, is that you think like, well, maybe they just couldn't have included that stuff, or they could have come up with new stuff. And I think that's the case. I mean, you look at Super Mario 64. Think of how many things in previous Mario games that are not in that game whatsoever. Like there's no
yeah,
Fire Flower, there's no Tanuki Tail, there's no like there's a lot of stuff that is not included in that game. Yet they made some new things, and the gameplay itself kind of made up for it too. I think I think honestly, the more I think about it, they could have pulled it off, and they weren't confident enough. They didn't think they could do it, or it was too hard. But I think they could have done it, man. And I would have loved to have seen what they would have come up with at the time, because I don't think it would have been bad. I think they really could have pulled off a Metroid N64 game in the 3D space, and just something a lot of moving pieces and working parts, and whatever they were feeling at the time. I guess they didn't feel the same way. And certainly it wasn't a franchise that maybe they wanted to take that risk with, or even felt people would even, bother to even buy it, right? Who knows? But I think the more we talk about this, I really think it was possible they could have done it.
right.
Maybe it wouldn't have been the Metroid game that we would envision. It may not have had some of the elements we thought of, but I think they could have made up for that with some new additions, changes to those things, like you said, like maybe the screw attack. Maybe the screw attack would have just been like a dash forward, like a set dash forward that deals damage or something that, right? And it's not
Yeah,
activated on a
maybe.
jump. Could have been something like that, or the speed booster. I don't know how they could have done that, but yeah, at the end of the day, we're looking back at it after over 20 years of game development, right, and advances in technology. But for what they had at the time, well, not only the resources and what the N64 was capable of, but what other games that were released on the same platform were capable of. I think they could have done it, and I really wish that they had at least given it a try, because I would have loved to have seen what it would have looked like. But at the same time, it probably would have been close to what we ended up seeing in like the beta images of Metroid Prime, and we ended up getting Metroid Prime as a result. So I guess the wait wasn't too bad.
So let me. I know you got a hurricane coming towards here, so I'll try and wrap this up
It's
quick.
here
I
already,
have two.
man.
Oh, good God. I have two questions that I want to ask you, and I'll ask you the first one because I'm actually not sure the answer myself,
Okay.
and I'm gonna hopefully be influenced by your answer. But like, what do you think would have been worse, to have a bad N64 Metroid game released or no Metroid game at all released?
Oh, bad Metroid game. Yeah, for sure. Because I already know, what the reality is of having no Metroid game in the N64, and it ended up being pretty good. And I know what happens when you release a bad Metroid game. So yeah, I will. I'll take the no Metroid over bad Metroid any day. And I think in the case of the N64, it probably could have been pretty bad too. Like I said, we ended up getting Metroid Prime out of it as a result in some kind of indirect way. So yeah, my answer is no Metroid in N64 over bad Metroid in N64.
You see, I was leaning towards that as well, but then another part of me is also just like, well, like I'm of the age where like I came into, I really came into gaming with the N64. Like Ocarina of Time was like my first like big game where I was like, whoa, this is incredible. So and I just wonder if like if Metroid would have had a game, even maybe if it wouldn't have been necessarily like, even if it would have been mediocre, let's say, kind of like Yoshi's Story, which is kind of a mediocre
Whoa,
game.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
I'm sorry,
Yoshi's
it kind of
Story
is.
is awesome. I cannot agree with that. I love that game. That game, I mean, it's no Yoshi's Island. Let's be fair.
No,
But it's a
which actually is funny because that again is another example of like a completely different style of game. But so anyways, to my point,
great
it's
game.
just like maybe there are some people that would have like maybe Metroid would have been a bigger franchise had it had a release on there and like had it kind of hooked in a newer generation and didn't skip that generation. I don't know.
No,
Like,
I think
I
you
feel
got a
like
point there.
but then to your point, it's just like, well, if it was bad, it would have sucked though, and it would have turned away an entire generation. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it all comes down to quality, but
How bad it was. Yeah, like if it was other, like
yeah,
that's the thing is that I don't know if it would have been Other M bad. Other M is just
no,
exception. Like it goes out of its way to be bad. Whereas like
I don't think
this
I don't
game,
think it would have been that bad.
exactly. I don't think it like would it have been a masterpiece like Mario 64 at Ocarina of Time. It could have been, but I don't know if that's a guarantee. But would have been horrible or really bad. Like I don't know if it would have been Superman 64 quality bad. Yeah, I actually that's a good point. If it wasn't like a masterpiece or it was just a decent game or whatever, it wasn't the worst game, then yeah, you're right. It probably would have had a really solid influence on the franchise just by virtue of just having a game on the N64 at all. So yeah, that's a good point. Still, I'm gonna stick with no Metroid game only because even if it was on the N64, I don't know if we would have gotten Metroid Prime, and I really love those games.
Right. I guess I don't really have a second question, more just a comment in hindsight,
Okay.
or to add on to that. But like, imagine like an N64 game comes out in let's say late 1999 after Super Smash Bros. Has come out. Like I feel like that could have really boosted the series because like like people always kind of dunk on Metroid sales, and like Super Metroid didn't sell very well, but like the original Metroid was a really well selling game. Like still probably had some equity. So like that, I just feel like maybe if you would have released a Metroid game after Super Smash, where like people were like, oh man, like I know Samus from this fighting game, and then you also had the audience that was like, oh yeah, Metroid, it's finally coming to 3D. Like maybe maybe that could have taken the series into a bigger direction. But then yeah, maybe we wouldn't have got Metroid Prime and the trilogy. So it's funny to look back and see what could have been and what ended up happening with the decision not to release a Metroid N64 game.
Yeah, and if they had released a Metroid game on the N64 after Smash, I would have 100% bought it, regardless of the
Yeah.
quality, because that's how I was introduced to Metroid. I had never played. I didn't even know that really Metroid and Metroid 2. I don't even know if I knew about Super Metroid. I honestly didn't know anything about Metroid. I don't even know if those games. I even really knew those games existed. I learned, until Smash. I didn't know about them until I was like, oh, who's this robot?
Me too. Yeah.
In this game, this is cool. I like the robot, and then I learned about it through there. So yeah, if they had released an N64 game, I 100% would have been on it. But then again, that's why I was 100% on Metroid Prime and Fusion when those came out. I was like, oh, yo, it's Samus from Smash. Hell yeah, I'm getting those games. And they ended up being really awesome. And then, I ended up going back and playing Super Metroid and all the other ones. Yeah, that definitely would have been huge. I think that's a good point to be made, that if Metroid, maybe not super regardless of the quality, but mostly, if they had just put that on the N64, I do think that would have had a very long-lasting effect on the franchise that maybe we did miss out on. I think
just to make it like a bigger series in terms of like more mainstream. I don't know if the quality would have been there like it was in Metroid Prime, but maybe we're talking about a series that's more akin to like, maybe not Zelda level, but like closer.
No, I 100% agree. I think that might have been that missed opportunity, and who knows? Because we might not have gotten Metroid Prime. Maybe Metroid Prime made up for it. I think in a certain amount of ways it kind of did. But we don't know to what extent compared to what a N64 Metroid game could have been. I mean, imagine, when all those big games are out and, you saw Mario and 64 and Link from Ocarina of Time and Donkey Kong here, and then you see the Metroid game right next to it. That automatically puts them on the same level in people's eyes, no matter what. That we could be living in a completely different, reality where we're getting a new Metroid game every year, and they're mostly good, right? If we had just gotten that N64 Metroid game. I definitely think there's a point to be made that could have had a long lasting effect in the franchise. I guess we'll never know.
It's fun to kind of play what if. I actually, really quick before we get out of here, I remember after playing Smash for the N64, I went and tracked down an old SNES copy of Super Metroid that I bought for $5 at like some old like video game or like a convenience store that still was renting Super Nintendo games. My dad was just like, instead of renting this, can I just buy it? And he's like, sure. So I got Super Metroid for $5.
There you go,
which
man.
I still have, by the way.
Nice.
But yeah, it's crazy to think like what if, what could have been. Could this game have been up there with like the Mario 64s and the Ocarina of Times and the Donkey Kong 64s? We'll never know. But I mean, we did end up getting Metroid Prime, so I'm not complaining.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know what you guys think a potential N64 Metroid game could have looked like. Would it have rocked? Would it went the other way? Let us know. Over on Twitter. We are at Omega Metroid Pod. Dak, let's get on out of here before the storm swallows you whole.
Yeah, man. You can follow me on @therapture_ on Twitter and on Twitch. I just hit 15 subs. Feel free, if you sub to me, you get that cool Ridley emote. I've been playing a lot of Halo recently, but I do intend to get back to Metroid Prime Trilogy on PC soon. I want to do my Metroid Prime 2 run. And be sure to check me out on those because I'm always posting some stuff. And of course, check out Andy on Twitter as well. And what's your Twitter again? And
at Spiteri316.
Boom.
That's an Austin 316 reference. Dak, should we tease them about what our next Inspired by Metroid title is going to be next week?
It starts with a B. It's my teaser.
There you go. We're going to be back with another Inspired by Metroid, and we're going to be breaking down a Metroidvania game. So make sure that you tune into that. Like Dak said, check us out on Twitter, at Omega Metroid Pod, at Spiteri316, at Rapture_, and of course, on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Go and check us out there. Like and subscribe, and recommend us to a Metroid fan in your life. That's going to do it for us, guys. We are out of here, but we will see you back next week for some Inspired by Metroid. Until then.